Well, so you could start by telling a bit about yourself. Your name is Craig Osborne.
No, Gibsone.
Gibson. I knew it was something like rock and roll.
Strange name. Yeah, I'm originally from Australia, and I was privileged to be born in the countryside, and we never had electricity, and we collected all of our drinking water because there was a big dry season, so we had to collect it in big tanks, and it was just beginning to become dependent on oil. Up until then, there were horses, and there was not very many machines. There were, of course, there was a few little cars, but that was just at the beginning. And then that, I give thanks that I experienced that in my childhood, because now, in some senses, we may need to rediscover some of the more simple lifestyle.
Yeah.
And then I left Australia in the late 50s and went to London for just to look, to see what the rest of the world was like. I had trained as a painter and a sculptor, and then of course I have a farming background. And then I met the mid-60s. That was my next big awakening, besides a cultural shock when I came to Europe, because here was European history. I had learned about it, but I live in the remote part of Australia. So
Yeah.
it's a big thing for us. But the mid-60s were a revelation. I luckily enough managed to cure myself of cancer and alcoholism in that period, and became a happy hippie. And then I became interested in spirituality because of the different experiences I was having. And
Through which path?
well, in the 60s in London it was everything. There was
Okay.
Eastern and Western, there was all different kinds of spirituality mixed up. But then eventually I don't know, I accidentally ended up in a place called Sami Ling Tibetan Center, which is run by the Kajupa order. And there was a very interesting teachers there, a man called Chogyam Trungpa and also Akon Rinpoche. And they had just begun trying to create a Western meditation center. And that was my big awakening. I learned to meditate, I learned to do yoga, and there I also heard about a lot of different teachers in India, so I went to India to search for teachers. But also I had heard of a place called Findhorn there, and somebody said, oh, you should go and see that, because that's a Western mystery school, not an Eastern mystery school.
What year was it?
1968.
1968. That's 40 years ago.
And so I came, and I was, again, completely surprised by what I found. There was nothing here, really, a few caravans and some middle-aged people, but they had such an interesting philosophy and spiritual attitude, much of it very similar to Eastern mysticism, but it was also very strong, what they call the Western mysteries. I felt at home. I had never felt such a sense of freedom, and they allowed you to practice any which way you wanted to, so I could continue with my Buddhist practice, but also they talked about co-creation with nature. I didn't know what that really meant, but that's when I began, you could say, my environmental journey back, my deep ecology. That began, I didn't know the language. And I've been living, I haven't lived in Findhorn the last 40 years, but I kept coming and going, and by 1970 I decided I will come and live in here. And then I have been away at times to visit communities in other parts of the world. But always I come back to myself, I go, this is home. Australia is my, my physical home, but this is my spiritual home. And I can combine my creativity, my artistic nature. I can make pottery, I can play music, I can garden, I can build houses, I can meditate, I can do all the things that I really like to do. This community acts as a very, like a fertile ground for creativity.
Yeah.
Not just mine, many people's creativity.
Yeah. Creativity in many meanings of the world.
Completely, yeah. And so it's an inward journey and an outward journey. And that's what I like. Here we don't separate spirituality from, you could say, life. Life and spirituality are intrinsically connected. And so we would think of, like here, we would try to talk of a secular enlightenment instead of a monastic enlightenment. Like living an ordinary life with all of the wonderful things that life offers and still attempting to reach a higher state of consciousness.
Did this secular path to enlightenment was something very new in the 60s?
Maybe we did. Yes, it was brand new. We didn't know what we were doing. It was this man Chogyam Trungpa, who at the Tibetan Center, who first introduced me to the idea of secular enlightenment. And then when I came to Findhorn, they said, well, of course, that's what it's all about. So here, instead of building a monastery, you build a secular, open, spiritual place that is contemplative and meditative, but also very active. And then this co-creation with nature, which was one of our biggest, I would say, contributions. We were green before it was popular to be green.
Yeah.
And we don't know what that means.
Before the rest of the world knew the color.
Well, I don't know. You know, Greenpeace began. All of these environmental movements and that, they also began in the 60s. People became more conscious, they became more active. Books were written like The Silent Spring. And many things were starting to go, we humans are not being aware. And of course then you have all of the indigenous and traditional spirituality from the North American Indians and South Americans, Aboriginals, Eskimos, all saying, hey, like you Europeans, you've lost it. You are destroying nature faster than it's replenishing itself. And so then, of course, we have this wonderful, Findhorn for me has been like a marriage of so many things. So you can do sweat lodges here and have shamanic practices and talk of your body being the earth and fire being your spirit and emotions being water, your blood, and you get right down inside of yourself, and air being like your mind, and you come alive and you think you're an alchemy. It's a process of reinventing yourself all of the time. That was a theme of the 60s. We didn't know what we were doing, but it was like, be more creative, be more conscious, be more loving, be more giving. Findhorn has always said it's a place of service. So even though many of us live comfortably, we are not rich. And I mean, half my time here in the last 40 years has just been giving, just building, just creating the place. Now I'm independent. But it's easy because I'm so creative. And I have built a place that allows me to continue to teach and do all the things that I want to do. And then we come to this thing of eco-village, and we go, oh, what's an eco-village? Well, an eco-village has windmills, and it has waste treatment plants, and it has food production. But also it has spirituality. It's vital that the people within eco-villages have some type of connection to creation. And you don't have to say God, or you don't have to say, you don't even have to say meditation. You can just say intuition. What is that deep, intrinsic, intuitive self? The thing you know. Something happens inside, and you know you have to do this. And it's not a selfish act. It's an act of sort of giving. And you do it. And that's what we would try to say we do. So what we build and all the things we have, so we make houses that breathe. We make biological waste treatment plants where we treat all of our sewage with nature, with the processes of nature.
Like working with.
Totally. And in this context it's working with nature, but it's working with your own inner nature.
Yeah.
The nature of oneself.